I just started paying more attention to where the food was coming from at the grocery store and stuff. And it just started to very quickly blow my mind. Like, you pick up a pack of blueberries, and like the closest I've ever seen a pack of blueberries from in the grocery store is Nova Scotia. It's usually like Ontario or down the States or South America or something. And I'm like, blueberries. Blueberries. We're in Newfoundland and we're shipping blueberries in from America. Like, why are we doing that?
Yeah, that makes no sense. I would think that we have loads of blueberries in Newfoundland.
And the blueberries, you go out on the pole line and pick some blueberries. They're 10 times better than the ones you get in the store. I picked up a 4-pack of tomatoes and it said product of Mexico on it. And I was like, I grow tomatoes. Like, I can grow tomatoes here. Why are we shipping this from Mexico? Yeah. Why are we doing that?
By the time you factor in the carbon footprint to ship those tomatoes from Mexico to get us to here in Newfoundland, it makes no sense.
No.
You must be able to produce them cheaper and get them to a local table cheaper than bringing it in from Mexico.
Like, that is the intuitive way that you would think about it. There's no way that you can ship it from Mexico cheaper than you can buy it from me.
Hello everyone, and welcome to this episode of Taking Action. I am your host, Michael Allen. Today I'm joined with my co-host, Ryan Peaton, as well as our guest, Adam Furlong. Adam is the owner and operator of Outport Acres. Adam, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
No problem. So tell us a little bit about how you got started and why you got into farming in the first place.
Well, I worked for about 10 years, a little over 10 years in oil and gas engineering offices and offshore. I worked out in Bull Arm with the Hebron project. I was actually on one of the vessels that towed the Hebron oil rig to field and set it down. And, my 10 years in that industry was good, not great, I would describe it. Like, there was certain aspects of the job that I really enjoyed, and there were certain aspects of it, mainly the office side of it and the whole office politics thing that I just really could not get my head around at all.
So we jumped in there pretty quick. You've got a background in oil and gas and an engineer. I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, I'm not an engineer. I went to Marine Institute.
Okay.
I did marine engineering systems design up there. So I worked in engineering offices doing, some drafting and some procedural work and writing procedures and stuff for work to be done offshore and subsea and everything. And I went offshore on some ROV vessels and some dive vessels, and we did a lot of work with inspection, repair, and maintenance with some of the fields offshore. And that part of the job I really liked, the field work and hands-on type stuff. But I didn't really like the office stuff. And in 2017, I was on the ROV vessel that went with the tow fleet to tow Hebron offshore. And I spent pretty much 3 full months on night shift on that vessel. I was home for 9 or 10 days over the course of that 3 months. And that was like a day or two here and there, scattered throughout 3 months.
The hours sound grueling.
Yeah. Now, it wasn't, the whole 10 years wasn't that intense, but, we're towing off a multi-billion-dollar project and trying to get it commissioned and set down on the seabed offshore in Newfoundland. It was kind of a time-sensitive thing, right? So we just had to do it.
So then the question is, how did you go from that to what you're doing now in farming, more specifically microgreens, I guess? Because I would think that not knowing anything about farming or growing food, just to put that out there, it would be more of a generational thing. So father's a farmer, son's a farmer, and it continues down the line.
Yeah, and that's usually what happens, multi-generational farming families. But I'm actually a first-generation commercial farmer. My parents and grandparents and everyone down the line all grew vegetables in their backyard for their own family's use, like most families in Newfoundland. But nobody in my family is a commercial farmer until me.
Right. So one of the running themes we've got on the show, and something that eventually comes out, I think we're getting to it real quick here tonight, is going from a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of people now, the transition is always hard, moving from an employment type position into business ownership, entrepreneurship, whatever you'd like to call it. So it sounds like you went through that based upon your
for sure.
your previous employment to moving into farming. That's a pretty big jump.
Yeah. So after the whole 3 month stint offshore, it ended like in the spring or early summer or something like that, and I was worn out from that. So I said, I'm not even looking for a new job, because at the end of Hebron, everybody knew that you were getting laid off at the end of that project, right? Because it was just your whole job is to build the rig and get it offshore. So once that was done, you're laid off. So it was a layoff, but it was an expected layoff. And I said, once I was done that, I'm not even looking for a job for the rest of the summer. I'm just taking it easy and enjoying the summer. And I basically spent the whole summer trying to figure out what I was going to do different, because I didn't really want to go back to doing that anymore. So I spent the whole summer researching different things. I have some background and experience on like construction and carpentry and contracting, so I did that a little bit, odd jobs over the summer, and I kind of landed on how do you make a sustainable living on small scale agriculture, because I've never had any interest in having, a 150 acre farm and, 10 acres of potatoes, 10 acres of carrots, 10 acres of turnip. I've got no interest in ever doing anything like that. So I found this market gardening style of farming, and it was all based around small land base, like human scale agriculture, rather than having a big 50-ton diesel burning tractor. It was all stuff that you could do by hand with small tools and on a small land base. And we lived in CBS at the time, and we had a little over a third of an acre, which still, with the house and a detached garage and everything on it, so it still wasn't very much land to be able to do very much. And that's where I found microgreens, because you didn't need any land for that really. We could grow it indoors. And so half of the downstairs in our house was unfinished, and I finished that half as a dedicated grow space for microgreens. And
did the neighbors start to question what you were growing?
my father-in-law, I got him to help me do some of the construction, and he was like, "What are you doing here anyway?" Because I never told him what we were doing. I was just like, "We need water over here, and we need this over here." And he was like, "What are you doing? Why do we need to run water lines into this room and everything?" And I explained to him that I was going to start growing some things for sale, and he was like, I could see the gears turning in his head. He immediately assumed that I was going to be growing weed. And he was like, we were just after having our first kid. He was like a couple months old. He was like, "Have you looked into like the fumes that might come off of something like that?" And I was like, "I'm not doing what you think I'm doing." So yeah, I explained it to him then, and he thought it was pretty cool. But I just, and I had, like I said, I worked in oil and gas for 10 years. I have no background at the time in restaurant or hospitality or food production at all, so I had no contacts, nobody that I could call and get my foot in the door or anything. So I just started growing microgreens and brought them to the farmers market, and I ended up next to my table was next to Sean Dawson. Do you know who I'm talking about?
We know Sean.
Yeah.
Or I know Sean. Do you know Sean?
I don't know him personally.
He's great.
I think I have his book though.
He does a lot of foraging and stuff.
Yeah.
And didn't know him at all, but he's just like one of the nicest people I've ever met. And he just started talking to me, asking what I was doing and everything. And all the chefs know him because he supplies them with a lot of stuff. So like every single time that a chef came to his table and bought something, he'd be like, "Hey, do you know Adam? Have you met Adam before? He's got some like really good microgreens here." And then I started meeting all the chefs, and they would come back every week and buy stuff. And then they started asking if I could deliver stuff to the restaurants. So I started doing that. And a bunch of like non-chef recurring customers were like, "I'd like to be able to get this stuff outside of just Saturday on the farmer's market. So this is the name of the produce manager at the grocery store that I shop at. Why don't you go talk to them?" So then I got into a few grocery stores that way. And
so which grocery stores specifically? Because like the big ones, Dominion and Sobeys?
No, not. I'm an approved vendor at Sobeys, but I haven't started supplying them with anything yet. But it started off with Belden's. Belden's Grocery downtown. And they're owned by Coleman's, so then it gravitated into Coleman's on Newfoundland Drive. So I've got both of those locations. And Simply for Life. Stavanger, White Rose Drive. Yeah. They carry our products too.
I just, I know you kind of gave me a bit of an answer there, but I just want to go back again because I find it's such a hard thing to come up with an idea You know you want to be an entrepreneur. You know you want to be self-employed, or again, whatever you want to call it. But coming up with an idea, especially if you're not going to take your experience from your employment and convert that to your own business, coming up with an idea to do something completely different is a really hard thing to do.
Yeah, and it was hard. And like I said, I started doing some construction and contracting and stuff like that. And then that wasn't really producing enough income. Like I could just tell pretty early on that wasn't going to turn into something I could hang my hat on, you know?
And this is when you lived in CBS?
Yeah. And then I started doing like some custom woodworking type stuff because I had a lot of woodworking tools. So then I was like taking orders for like custom woodworking projects and selling that, and that was pretty good. But again, wasn't going to turn into something big. And then because I found this style of farming and it looked interesting, I tried it, and it just started snowballing from the farmer's market and from Sean Dawson, really.
Yeah. So would you say you just kind of like accidentally fell into it?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I had an interest in it, and it just quickly snowballed and started growing. So I said, okay, well, I think I should capitalize on this, and I just continued as much as I could produce. Every week at the farmer's market was selling. Literally every week I would go and sell out before the end of the farmer's market. So then next week I would bring more and I'd sell out, and the next week I'd bring more and I'd sell out. So
that's fantastic to hear.
Yeah.
Before you go on, I'm wondering, did you have much runway when you left your full-time position offshore, which is usually known to be pretty good money? Did you have much of a period of time where you knew you could take on this new venture?
I did take another engineering office job after. I think it was that fall or the following spring or something. So for a period of time, Outport Acres was a side gig until it grew enough that I felt confident in it. And then COVID happened, and the engineering company that I was working for at the time started laying people off. So this was like my third experience with mass layoffs in the engineering office, and I was just like, okay, I'm done with this. So we sold our house in CBS and moved out to the Bonavista Vista Peninsula in the middle of the pandemic, like in the worst of the pandemic, which was hard. And
why? Just if you don't mind.
Well, I'm from the Bonavista Vista Peninsula originally, so moved back closer to home. And my wife was, her work had everybody sent home to work from home. So she moved out and just worked her normal job from home, which she's still doing now.
Okay.
So that was a little bit of a safety net, you know, and I just kind of went all in on what we're doing now, and seems like it's going really good. Like, we've got there was a 32 by 42 detached building on the property that was completely unfinished inside, like completely unfinished. Like it was gravel on the floor, no insulation, no electrical, no nothing.
You mean the property that you moved to?
Yeah, the one we moved to.
So was it was it like a concrete floor and just just structure, or was it just a structure on the ground?
Just a structure. It was crushed stone floor.
Wow.
So I spent 2022 pretty much 8 or 10 months of that finishing that structure and like turning it into a dedicated business space with a grow room and like a harvesting and packaging and cold storage area and an office space and everything. So it's kind of where we are now. And then last year I spent the better part of 6 months clearing like an acre and a quarter of land of trees. And I've got that all ready to go now for this upcoming growing season. I've got 2 greenhouses on that, and we're going to do a bunch of outdoor field crops and got a few honeybee colonies. And
wow, so you're going to start producing honey?
Yeah.
That's really cool. So it sounds like it's growing. It's doing well.
Yeah, it's been going good.
How do you have it down to a science when it comes to how much space you need to how much product you need to yield to bring to market and how fast you need to sell it? Is that challenging to figure out?
With the microgreens, I've been at that now for about 5.5 years, so I do pretty much have that down to a science. Like I've got a pretty large spreadsheet that I made up myself where I can like input my average yield of a particular crop and then how much orders I've got, and then it all talks to each other through formulas and tells me how much I need to plant each week and what needs to be harvested and who that's going to and everything. So The microgreens are pretty good.
Wow.
All of the outdoor field crop and the greenhouses and everything, I don't feel like I've got that down to a science yet. Hopefully over the next few years I will have the same level of confidence with all of that. But I don't feel like it's really possible to have it completely down to a science, because like the microgreens, I grow that in an indoor climate controlled space where I control the temperature, I control the humidity, I control the airflow, the light schedule, the watering schedule. You don't have that outdoors,
Right.
weather can change, you can get too much rain, not enough rain, so.
So let's go right on back to when you first started. You're in your house in CBS. You had a grow op going in your basement. Your father-in-law was kind of questioning, suspicious about what you were really growing down there. So that was your first crack at it. It sounds like you dedicated a fair bit of space of your house to... What were some of the hurdles you had trying to figure out how much you should plant at how much time and how far you should space things out, how much product you need to bring to the market with you every week, and what were the challenges there of getting that started and figured out?
Well, the space that I renovated in that house, I kind of went about it in a way where if the whole venture just completely failed, I could just take it all out and make that space into a spare bedroom.
Start growing weeds.
So I already had like some of the renovations done where I could just turn it into a spare bedroom and move on with my life.
You were going to grow weed. You can say it.
That's plan B.
But no, I just started with we grow them on racks and trays. One rack can take 20 trays. Okay. So I just started with one rack with 20 trays. No idea if I was going to be able to sell 20 trays. We had 4 or 5 different varieties of microgreens when we started. So I just did an even amount of all of them, brought them to the market. And then the ones that sold best, the ones that seemed the most popular, I started more of those and more. And, it just, after a while, I said, okay, well, I'll get a second rack and then a third rack and a fourth rack. And right now we've got 8 racks. We do like 80 to 120 trays of microgreens a week. Which is like
and how many,
30 to 40 pounds a week.
Okay. And how many individual packages or customers items is that?
I'll talk about like summertime, because like into peak season during tourism and stuff, the restaurants are all booming, and that kind of lasts right up until New Year's. With, business or companies making Christmas party reservations and New Year's Eve bookings and all that kind of thing. So we'll do like 40 to 50 large, like 1 pound packages for restaurants a week, and I'll do like 160, 170 smaller retail packages for our home delivery subscriptions and grocery stores.
Okay.
Every week.
Nice.
Yeah.
And so I took a look at the website. It's a great website, by the way. You go on and you have your broken down into 4 weeks. You can purchase from 2 to 4 bags per month. And then when you select what greens you want, are you selecting a variety that gets added to 1 bag, or is it 1 bag of each green that you're selecting?
So you can select, so let's just say the package that's 4 bags, 4 different varieties a week. You can pick, for this week I want pea shoots, broccoli microgreens, radish microgreens, and a salad mix. And you'll get the 4 of those in 4 separate packages in a bag, and that'll show up at your house on Wednesday, Thursday. And then you can select exactly which varieties you want for each week and for a 4-week period, and you'll get that every single week. And then at the end of the 4-week period, you can either just let it roll over and continue on with the subscription, or you can cancel it, or you can change your selections or whatever you want, right? Yeah.
So, as Michael knows about me, my favorite business model is a subscription recurring revenue. And for whatever reason, I don't own a business with recurring revenue or subscription based. But I think subscription based is brilliant because it does have that recurring revenue. You've got your sales. It's easier in my mind to project forecasting numbers and sales, and it's a good business model. Yeah,
it helps a lot just for like planning and stuff. But the one thing, because like I started the business in 2019. And then in, I believe it was January of 2020, was that the whole Snowmageddon state of emergency thing?
Yeah.
So started in 2019. January was Snowmageddon. Restaurants, farmers markets were all shut down. So then I had the grocery stores on the go, which when everything shut down, I was like, oh my God, I've got all this product that I had slated for restaurants this week and for the farmers market the weekend. And I didn't really want to be like, to the restaurant owners, I didn't want to be like, you had this order. You had to take it. You had to pay me.
Right.
Because, they're closed. So that they're losing out business too, right? So I didn't want to do that.
But then didn't the unexpected happen and restaurants essentially boomed with takeout and grocery stores
and the grocery stores like I delivered stuff to the grocery stores on Wednesday and on Friday they all started calling me saying we're sold out, do you have any more? So then everything that I had extra trying to figure out what I'm going to do with it, it all very quickly disappeared. And then
That's
so
crazy.
then I actually got Simply for Life, wasn't a customer at the time, and Gail, the girl who owns it, used to go to the farmers market all the time, and she knew the farmers market was shut down, so she reached out to all the farmers market vendors and was like, if you have anything that you want to bring into her store, her retail store, bring it in, because they were opened up as an essential service, right? Yeah, so it worked out really well, and then we weren't doing home delivery subscriptions at that time, and then the pandemic happened immediately after that, a couple months later. And again, restaurants were shut down, farmers markets were shut down, and then the restaurants were really volatile because they'd be open, and then somebody get COVID, they'd be shut down, and then be open again at 50% capacity, and then somebody got COVID and they'd be shut down. So, and again, I didn't want to hold them to it. You had an order in with me this week, and you've got to pay me, because I knew that they were losing out on pay too. So, I started the home delivery subscriptions during the pandemic.
Nice.
And that's when that started, and it went over really well, so we just kept doing it.
Yeah, it's really smart. You seem to be able to pivot and see opportunity when disaster strike to move quickly and to keep business afloat.
Sometimes you need to. Sometimes it's that pressure that causes you to pivot.
Yeah, and the recurring subscription thing is a good business model, but the thing that I've determined from Snowmageddon and the pandemic was I think it's essential to have multiple market streams.
Yes.
Because when everything was shut down except the grocery stores were a bit huge for me. And then when COVID, everything was coming and going, the subscriptions and the grocery stores are really good, and then tourism season, the restaurants are really good. And
it is definitely a key thing in business to have multiple revenue streams.
Yeah.
So you've got restaurants. Do you still go to the farmers markets?
I don't come to the one in here. After we moved to the Bonavista Vista Peninsula, I actually did come in for a few months, but then at that time I was doing the deliveries to the Avalon Peninsula myself, so I was in here every Wednesday and every Saturday.
Right.
I was in here twice a week, which is 2.5 hour drive in, 2.5 hour drive back, plus do all the deliveries on a Wednesday, do the farmers market all day on a Saturday. It was a bit too much.
Okay, so then you've got the restaurants, you got the grocery stores, and you're still doing subscriptions. Do you foresee a fourth revenue stream coming in your future?
Now that we've got all that land cleared, and we're going to be doing a lot more than the microgreens alone, we've been doing a little bit of that stuff, much, much smaller quantities over the last few years, but now I'm kind of jumping in with both feet this summer coming.
Okay.
And we're going to try to kind of convert our microgreen subscription into an actual full-blown CSA. Are you familiar with what that is?
No, I'm not.
So it's community supported agriculture is what it stands for. It's basically you could, at the beginning of the year, you could kind of invest your money into our farm. So you would sign up from, say, April to December to receive a portion of everything that the farm produces every single week. So you would kind of pay for that up front. That helps us up front because, we've got to buy all of our seeds. We've got to prep everything, get it all ready to go. So it's a lot of money up front that helps us get started for the growing season. And then every single week you would receive a box containing every single thing that was produced on the farm that week.
Sounds like a pretty good deal.
Yeah. So, 1 week you could get microgreens, tomatoes, and peppers, and lettuce, and some root vegetables, and then the following week you could get some version of that, but there could be some leeks in there as well, or some hot peppers, or later on in the season you could get a jar of honey. Just depending on what's in season on the farm, you know.
But aren't there incredible health benefits to eating local food and what's in season?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
And like the way we're doing it, we're not certified organic, but everything that we do is like grown by organic practices, and we don't use any chemicals or chemical fertilizers or pesticides or herbicides or any of that stuff that I don't think has any place in our food production system to begin with.
Mm-hmm. As clean as you can get it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I mean, there's a lot to talk about with that kind of stuff. I mean, glyphosate, for one, is the most widely used herbicide in the world. Like, there's millions of tons of glyphosate sprayed on agricultural fields every year in the world, and I don't really understand how that hasn't kind of come to a head to being outlawed as of now. Like, it's still a product that's approved by Health Canada. You can go on and there's an acceptable amount of glyphosate for you to eat that everyone's just okay with. And it's been shown time and time again in all kinds of studies to cause all kinds of different health problems in people, and like in pregnant women and newborn children because of this, birth defects and liver cancer and all kinds of things.
All kinds of awful things.
Yeah.
Is it maybe because, and I'm not defending them, I don't know anything about this, disclaimer. Just put that out there. Is it maybe because is it a necessary evil? Is there another product that can replace this that's healthier and safer? And if they never had that, is the outcome of not using this chemical in this mass production, is it worse to not have it and then not be able to produce the food? Maybe that's why. I don't know. I'm just looking for your feedback.
It's essentially just an herbicide, so they just spray it to keep the weeds under control. And I think the real replacement for glyphosate is to transform our food production systems as a whole, because the reason that they're spraying it is because they've got 150 acres that they couldn't possibly control the weed pressure on. Unless they
By
can
hand,
just
you mean?
unless they can just broadcast this wide spectrum herbicide that's going to just take care of the problem for them. But then the end result is that you've got this produce that's
Poisonous.
laced with poison, essentially.
Yeah.
So your pitch would be to remove the large-scale agriculture, therefore getting rid of glyphosate, and reducing it to smaller farms more often. More people have produced their own food.
Yeah, I think I've heard kind of a catchphrase, but I think it really speaks to what needs to happen. Is like, we don't need any more mass-produced food. We need more food produced by the masses.
Right.
So if we don't need another 1,000-acre farm. We need 500 more 2-acre farms.
So in that mindset, there should be more farmers like you.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
Then the question is, how do we see? I didn't miss a beat on that. He's like, yes, more of that.
Right. I know where your head's at.
That was the
I
state.
think I do.
Well, I was just curious. How do we attract the next generation coming up to farming to get people involved in it? Because just I'll say it, in my industry, I'm in construction. It's harder and harder to get new workers coming into the industry. It's extremely challenging, at least in my experience, to get new tradespeople coming in, staying in the industry. And if they do come in, they want way too much money starting out, and they end up honestly going to Alberta or wanting to work offshore on bigger projects like what you worked on.
I think there's a lot of different factors to be considered there, because, I think over the last several decades there's been a kind of gravitation towards when you're graduating, and it happened with me when I was graduating high school. It was like, you've got to go in and do a skilled trade or engineering or something to get into the oil and gas industry, because that's where the money is, and that's the only way you're going to be able to make a life for yourself.
Right.
And I think that that's starting to come back to earth a little bit. Like the whole mindset of like, you're not going in to be a mechanic, you're not going in to be a plumber or an electrician or anything. Like, it just seemed like all those skilled jobs were kind of off the table. Like, you were not going to do that. And now it seems like more people are taking an interest in that.
Yeah.
And
I
it'll
think
continue as well. I think now that AI is replacing a lot of the white collar jobs.
yeah.
There's going to be a natural push back to the trades because we need the power infrastructure to power AI in the first place.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to see this big swing back that way.
Yeah, and I think like with agriculture specifically, I think the only real way that it's going to happen is for the general public to kind of realize what's going on with the food that they're eating and the food that you're putting on your children's plate, and the fact that it's not healthy. And I think any food that is produced using those methods, large scale corporate mega farms and stuff that's sprayed with all these nasty chemicals and herbicides and everything. I equate it back to smoking. You can't even see cigarettes in a store anymore. They're hidden behind cabinets. The packages are just covered in warnings about the negative impacts on your health. And they're even putting warnings on individual cigarettes now, like you're killing yourself by smoking this and things like that. And then, we've all been taught, and, Health Canada and everything says, this is your daily recommended intake of fruits and vegetables and everything because that's healthy. And I think that if fruits and vegetables are being produced in that way, there should be a warning right on the tag in the grocery store. Like, this was produced using methods that cause it to be harmful to your health. Because there's a certain aspect of false advertising there. Like you're picking up an apple, you think it's healthy, you're going home, you're doing the right thing, having an apple for a snack instead of a bag of chips. But that's covered in chemicals that you can't see, smell, or taste.
Right.
And you're putting it into your body thinking you're doing something healthy.
Yeah, I think
and it's actually causing harm to you.
There's some sort of spray now that they spray on these individual fruit that's like its own little plastic wrap.
Yeah.
I think it's like either a wax base or some other
Sounds
sort of
awful.
base. Yeah, it is awful.
Yeah.
So
It's on all the fruit.
what about what's your take on non-GMO products, non-genetic modified products, and like in products labeled organic? Because I'm seeing more and more of that when we go to grocery stores.
Yeah.
Now, if you look for it, there's a lot of organic options out there and non-GMO options.
There are, and I'm a little bit skeptical of that too, because small scale farmers all over the world started to see this trend of these mega farms who were producing stuff en masse and not in a healthy way. So they said, okay, we're going to create this organic certification for people like us who are producing things the right way.
Okay.
And then eventually enough consumers saw the benefit to that and jumped on board with it. And now these big mega farms have just figured out a way to technically be organic, but they're not really doing anything much different. So you go into a store, and unless it's like something organic that was grown here or, close by, or the farmer and the way that they farm and stuff, you can't really be sure that it's actually healthy anyway.
So do you think that it's kind of false advertising?
Yeah.
In a lot of ways?
Yeah, I think so. Because, and for one, if you've got an organic piece of produce that came from California, even if it was grown, the right way, and it is actually healthy, it just came from California. It traveled 5,000 kilometers to get here. So, if you take a piece of produce is growing on a plant, the plant's alive, you cut the piece of produce off. You've just removed it from its source of nutrients. So technically it immediately starts dying. So if it's got to travel 5,000 kilometers over a couple of weeks to get to you, that's why half the produce on grocery store shelves are half gone bad when you take them home.
Right.
Did you see The Need to Grow? It's an excellent documentary. Adam and I talked about it a little while ago. In that, I believe they say you cut a head of lettuce and inside there's this like white milky liquid. And it's extremely healthy for you. But by the time you see your lettuce on the grocery store shelves, it doesn't exist anymore. It's completely gone away. It's all that nutrients is
No
just
way.
no longer there. Yeah.
Yeah,
We want to
I think
reduce.
one of my earliest things when I was just getting started at farming and stuff was I just started paying more attention to where the food was coming from at the grocery store and stuff. And it just started to very quickly blow my mind. Like, you pick up a pack of blueberries, and like the closest I've ever seen a pack of blueberries in the grocery store is Nova Scotia. It's usually like Ontario or down the States or South America or something. And I'm like, blueberries, blueberries. We're in Newfoundland and we're shipping blueberries in from America. Like, why are we doing that?
Yeah, that makes no sense. I would think that we have loads of blueberries in Newfoundland.
so
the blueberries,
good,
you
too.
Really good
go out on the pole line and pick some blueberries. They're 10 times better than the ones you get in the store.
Yes. Yeah.
So I mean, I don't know. I picked up a pack of tomatoes, a 4-pack of tomatoes, and it said product of Mexico. And I was like, I grow tomatoes. Like, I can grow tomatoes here. Why are we shipping this from Mexico?
Yeah.
Why are we doing that?
You should be able to get them here. I mean, by the time you factor in the carbon footprint, the ship
Yeah.
with those tomatoes from Mexico to get us to here in Newfoundland,
Yeah.
it makes no sense.
No.
You must be able to produce them cheaper and get them to the farm, to a local table, cheaper than bringing it in from Mexico.
And I think, like, that is the intuitive way that you would think about it. There's no way that you can ship it from Mexico cheaper than you can buy it from me. But I think the reality is that all these big corporations got so many different relationships with each other. Like, did you see last year when all of the European farmers were like having big protests and riots and stuff? And
Yeah.
they had
Yeah.
like one of the main highways blocked off with farm tractors and stuff over there, right?
Yeah.
The reason for that was that some information over there got leaked that the biggest grocery chain in Ireland, I believe it was, they found out that they were getting 6-pound bags of carrots from a farm in Mexico for 19 cents a bag.
Wow.
What?
And then they're selling it for like $8 or $9 a bag, right?
So they got a 6-pound bag of carrots from Mexico
For 19 cents.
for 19 cents shipped
Yeah.
to Ireland. Is that
And
what
then
you
they
said?
were selling them for $7 or $8 a bag. And then like all of the Irish farmers were like,
That's crazy.
this is completely unsustainable. Like, I cannot possibly sell you a bunch of carrots for 19 cents.
Right.
So, like, there's no winning with this model.
No.
So I wonder now, how do the farms in Mexico do it? What are they doing to be able to sell it for so cheap? Is it because of the amount that they would make there? Their cost of
it's gotta
living
be-
is so different? Is it just
gotta be
pure
the-
slavery?
It's got to be the wages that they're paying. I mean,
Yeah, low wages is a big part of it. High volume is another part of it. But then the high volume thing is another whole problem because, like, and you've seen it multiple times here in the last few years, or well, you've seen it globally for the last few years, like, with all the droughts and wildfires and stuff down in California. I believe it was San Diego. A farm in San Diego was the biggest almond producer in the world. And then they produced like 80 something or 90 something percent of the almonds that were consumed worldwide.
wow.
So now California, very prone to droughts, very prone to wildfires. And it got to the point where that producer just threw in the towel. They were like, we can't do this anymore. And like the amount of an almond tree uses a lot of water, for one.
Yeah.
And you're doing it in a place that's prone to drought and water shortages and wildfires.
Right.
So then
Wow.
they just couldn't do it anymore. They shut down their whole operation. Now almonds are in a shortage of supply globally and the price skyrocketed.
Right.
Wow.
And then, you might look at that and just be like, wow, it's just almonds. It's not a big deal. But then it happened with everything, the biggest supplier of romaine lettuce in the world was down the States somewhere. And last year they had a big problem with listeria recalls and water shortages and crop loss. And that's why you couldn't get romaine here for a long time. And then when you could get it, it was double or triple the price.
Yeah.
And now they're talking about the same thing with beef this year, 2025. They're expecting the price of beef to skyrocket because it's all centralized into one or two producers down the central states, and they're having problems.
So you're saying we're putting too much reliance on these big producers, and when they can't do it anymore, it puts us in a real situation and puts the price of our food way too high.
Exactly.
And it's just the system set up for failure.
Yeah. But if you had, just say Eastern Newfoundland had 20 farms like mine, and next week I have a problem with my lettuce. I don't have lettuce this week, but the other 19 farms do.
Yeah.
So you can just get lettuce from them. It's not a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
But if it all
Redundancy.
comes from one source or one or two sources, then you're just setting yourself up for failure.
Mm-hmm.
I know we've got more farms here in Newfoundland than what meets the eye, but do you think that Newfoundland as a whole is missing an opportunity here to jump on more farming opportunities?
Yeah, I do think so. Newfoundland and all of Canada really has had I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head now, but it's huge. It's like 90-something% of the farms that existed in Newfoundland and in Canada
Right.
60 years ago are gone.
What happened?
Oh.
They just shut down. They're just not in existence anymore, or they got consolidated into these larger farms and now owned by one large corporation. And
Well, that's another thing too. I mean, if more people start to do their own small farms, but they can't get the cost down enough to profit and make a living, then they're not going to be able to compete with the larger box stores.
yeah, and I think the larger box stores need to just accept the fact that their whole model of food supply is unsustainable. You know, they're not going to be able to do this forever. And I know that, like, for the most part, capitalist corporate empires are just going to want to milk something for as much money as they can while they can. So maybe they're just content to continue doing this for as long as they can and make the money while they can. And then when it all goes bottom up, they'll just shut down their stores, lay off all their employees, and walk away
Right.
with lots of money in their pocket. But I mean, if they would just pay the farmers, their own local farmers, a fair price for the produce that they produce, then they could eliminate all these supply chain issues that are coming from international producers, and you would end up with healthier products for the people who are consuming them. You would end up with less supply chain issues to begin with, because, you know, if I'm 10 kilometers or 200 kilometers away, it's a lot different than 6,000 kilometers away across 2 international borders and ships and tractor trailers. And
I feel like there's a lot of, there must be a lot of corporate greed involved with this. They're more focused, these bigger chains seem to be more focused on the profit,
yeah,
getting their shelves full, pushing the product at the door for the best margin they can possibly push it out. They're more focused on that, clearly, than the quality of the product they're putting on the shelf.
yeah, and that kind of ties into what we were talking to before, like the whole grown to order type thing. Like, we kind of try to plan ahead for what we anticipate we'll be able to sell, and then we grow that much and sell it all. So we're kind of having the product sold before it's grown.
Yeah.
Whereas the typical supermarket style of doing it is buy it all up front, fill our shelves with the anticipation that somebody's going to buy it.
Yeah.
Right.
And then if they don't buy it before it goes bad, or when it's kind of starting to go bad, that's when it all goes on sale. And everybody's looking at their flyers and rushing out to the grocery store to buy what's on sale this week. And they're really just buying old, nearly outdated produce that's not really fit to eat.
So there's a lot of obvious benefits to more people farming. Brings more healthy food closer to its consumer. But then at the opposite side of that, it's also going to introduce more competition for you.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts around when more people start farming? It's going to reduce the demand for your product as well.
It is. I will say that I feel like my main competitor is people who are 6,000 kilometers away, because most people are just going to go to the nearest chain grocery store and buy all their food. So most of my produce is competing with a company that's growing all that produce that has 1,500 times more money than I have. And that's the hardest part, because if there were a lot more farms like mine, you know, like, I can't feed everyone in Newfoundland. I will never be at a point where I can feed everyone in Newfoundland. And if anybody else is doing what I'm doing, they're not going to be able to either. So, I mean, you know, you heard it thrown around all the time that 10% of the food that is consumed on the island is produced on the island. So 90% comes in from elsewhere.
Wow.
So, I mean, if there are 20 other farms like mine, yes, we're technically in competition with each other, but not really.
There's enough market share to go around.
Yeah, I think so.
And just wait for another event when that 90% is not able to be fulfilled.
Yeah.
And then the local farmers are all that we have. You know, we're
well,
so
I mean,
insecure.
you see it on a smaller scale every time that there's a big storm and Marine Atlantic can't run for a few days. Like, watch how quickly the grocery store shelves start to go empty.
Yeah.
Because most of what's on the grocery store shelves are coming across Marine Atlantic.
Yes, yeah, everyone hoards it. So, it sounds like what we need to do here is increase the demand for more locally grown food.
Yeah.
I know you've probably spent a lot of time thinking about this. How do we do that?
It's a really difficult question.
Yeah, I know.
If I knew the answer to that, I'd be doing a lot better than I am. But
Well, I think the conversation that we're having now and just bringing the information that you have to more people is valuable.
And I think that's all it is just the consumer to get more on board with it. And I do see it happening more and more, like after the Marine Atlantic shuts down, and then usually it's like everyone starts talking more about local food production and food security. And then, like, when Marine Atlantic gets back out and the grocery store shelves are full again, nobody ever thinks about it ever again.
Right.
But lately, I have found that it kind of sticks around in people's minds after Marine Atlantic interruptions causes the grocery stores to go empty, and then Snowmageddon causes big issues, and COVID causes big issues. I feel like it's definitely knocking around in the back of people's minds way more now than it ever has been. So hopefully that trend continues, and everybody can just see the value of having more local food production.
I think the majority of people probably are not going to get into farming. I myself want to, because I want to have the best quality food for the cheapest price I can, and I can't see it being any cheaper than producing yourself. I mean, you probably could buy a less quality product from the grocery store or from anywhere else and get that for a cheaper price, but you can't sacrifice on quality when it's food that you're putting in your body and your family's body.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like people do, though. Not intentionally. I don't feel like when you go buy something from a farm, from a grocery store that was farmed in Mexico, that you're intentionally looking at it. Kind of like with the apple example you used earlier. No one goes and buys a bag of apples and thinks, oh, I'm doing something wrong here. It's the mindset is, I'm eating fruit. Fruit is good for me.
Yeah.
And even though they might be aware that it was produced 6,000 kilometers away from you, and how did it get here, and how's it still red, and why is it ripe, and all these things, I feel like those questions just get pushed to the back of the mind.
Yeah.
And what comes to the front of the mind is, I'm eating fruit, and fruit is good for me.
Yeah,
It gets simplified.
especially these days with the inflation and the cost of everything. Like, if you can just afford to have the food in your house for you and your family to eat, then a lot of people are just happy to be able to do that. But
We need more intentional transparency. Like what you were saying about just labeling food for what it is.
Yeah.
And not really trying to market it, but just being honest and transparent. I don't think that's going to happen because...
Can you imagine? Sorry to cut you off. Can you
ahead.
imagine going into a grocery store here, going into like the bigger, like Sobeys or Dominions or even Coleman's, and there's a sign posted up over the apples in the produce lane. It's like, caution, these apples look good.
The wax on the skin of these apples contain toxic chemicals that are going to be detrimental to your health.
Just imagine that.
I don't think there'll be any touch. There'll be a full stack there and they'll be rotting away.
And that's the way that the people who are producing these things, that's the way that they want it.
Yeah.
Because, like I said earlier, it's tasteless, it's odorless, and you can't see it. So most people are just going to see an apple. Apples are healthy, I'm going to eat that apple.
Right.
And you're not going to even know the difference that there's stuff on that apple that you shouldn't eat.
The only way to get more transparency into the system is to get more involved with the system. And I don't think we're going to be able to enforce much change from the consumer level. We may, a little bit, over a long period of time on a lot of purchases.
Yeah.
But the best way is to keep it in your own hands. I have an analogy I use for money. I say your money is safest in your own hands. Your food is safest in your own hands as well. You know, if you're the one growing it, you know exactly what's in it.
Yeah. And I think, like you said earlier, there's a very large percentage of the population who are just not going to do that. They're not going to be a farmer. They're not going to grow most of their own food in their backyard. Or some people who are just not going to grow any of their own food in their backyard. I think a big thing that needs to happen is just like people to have a mindset of knowing where your food came from. And like, I think a big part of that is like knowing your farmer. Like, I think you should have a farmer, your go-to farmer, and you know them, and you know how they produce things, and you know that they're not spraying this toxic stuff on your food, and then you're not growing the stuff yourself because maybe you don't have time, but at least you know that where it's coming from is a good, healthy, fresh source.
I think the obstacle is the convenience factor in that.
Yeah.
It's, you go to the grocery store, the product is there, it's available, you don't have to think about it, you don't have to put effort into it, you're busy. It's the reason people go to fast food
Yeah.
restaurants. Other than that, it tastes good, but it's fast. It's pretty commonly known that it's not good for you.
Yeah.
But it's there. It's in front of you. There's a
Yeah,
fast food joint.
It's the convenience factor is the big thing because like supermarkets didn't even really become a really big commonplace thing until after World War II, when they were producing lots and lots and lots of food to try to feed the war effort, and then after the war ended, they just kept producing it, and then somebody said, "How can we capitalize on this? How can we sell all this?" And then that's what they did. Just put up a giant building in the middle of town that you can't not see.
Yeah.
So you've got the visibility there. Everybody knows that building is there, and it's just got everything in it. Instead of having to go down to the farmer's market and go to the butcher and go to the baker and pick it all up in 4 or 5 stops. Now it's all right there in one place, and nobody really questioned where it came from or how it got there.
Mm-hmm. And I guess the farmer's market is kind of what the supermarket used to be. I mean, most likely there was a place in time where everyone came together instead of making their customers go to each location.
Yeah.
They came together in a market and they sold other things. And there's no reason we can't go back to that as well.
Yeah.
I think we certainly are with the farmer's market itself.
I think we need a mindset change.
Yeah.
Keep pushing it. Keep having these conversations. I do want to go back and ask a different question to change the topic a little bit, unless you want something to add to this before I do that.
No, good.
Bringing it back to the business side of things. You said you are growing. You cleared some more land. So one thing that I kind of want to circle back around before we went on the food tangent there, but it was really interesting. I just wanted to keep that going. But now I think we're kind of done with that for a second. I want to go back to the growth of the business.
Yeah.
With growth, and there comes certain growing pains.
Yeah.
And you had mentioned that the hardest part about these subscriptions is, and correct me if I'm wrong in saying this, is the time it takes out of your week to come in here for a full day. You said before we started recording even that it could be a 14, a 16-hour day for you to drive into the metropolitan area, the city area, make all your deliveries, and then by the time you get back, you've completely lost the day. You're exhausted. So now you're talking about expanding and growing, and with that, you're going to need more of your time.
Yeah.
Or hire people.
Yeah, and that's, up until now, it's just been me, which has not been easy. Like, last year, I spent a lot of time clearing that land and getting it all ready, but the year before, I actually produced more food 2 years ago than I did last year because clearing the land and everything took up a lot of my time last year. But even 2 years ago, at the end of the year, at the end of the regular growing season, I was absolutely exhausted. Mm-hmm. I did way too much myself. Mm-hmm. So I think this upcoming year, I'm going to do even more than I did that year. And I'm definitely getting to a point where I'm just not going to be able to do it all myself. So
you've thought about this. So what are your thoughts on...
I am going to have to hire somebody, but, other small business owners that I know, I've heard horror stories from them of trying to hire somebody and, just like the turnstile of getting somebody in, training them in, and not working out, they're gone. Now you've got somebody else that you need to train in. And so I am nervous about that. Hopefully I can find somebody who has a certain degree of passion about locally produced healthy food, the same as myself, that will be happy to be involved in a operation like mine. Mm. But
there's another approach as well, and not necessarily jumping to hire somebody, but you can...
Don't you say you're going to use AI to grow vegetables.
No. That's not what I was going to say. But that's a good idea. I was thinking you could automate things without using AI. There's lots of things that you could do to take things off your plate and streamline certain things. And that kind of ties into another question that I had, which is... I'm blanking on it now, my other question. Where was I going with that?
Well, I'll bring it back to the employee section. I'm finding the same thing.
Yeah.
Everything you just said, the pains with hiring people and getting somebody in and training them, and they don't have any passion for the work. It doesn't seem like they want to be there. You do your best to create a good work environment, but it just doesn't seem to be enough. And then the culture that I feel like we've moved into as a whole society is you're only supposed to work somewhere for 2 or 3 years, 4 years max, and then you gotta go to the next spot, go to the next spot. And people
It's
are
kind
jumping
of
around.
gone are the days where you worked for the post office for 35 years and retired with a pension.
Yeah, and
It
I'm not
doesn't really happen very much anymore.
I'm not saying that either are good or bad, but it comes with challenges
Yeah, for sure.
to get people in.
Now I kind of, like you were saying, I was having to come in here and go around, if I had 40 household deliveries and 8 or 10 restaurants and 3 or 4 grocery stores to stop at. It was a 2.5 hour drive in and then drive all over God's creation on the Avalon Peninsula and 2.5 hour drive back. And it would end up being like a 12, 14, sometimes 16 hour day for me every Wednesday. And it was like, do all kinds of manual work on the farm and everything every week. And Wednesday was my most tired evening when I got back from just sitting and driving all day.
Yeah.
When I got home, I was just completely wrote off every week. So I started using the Big Feed Club as a grocery distribution company here in town. And now I just, I still try to come in once a month, once every 6 weeks or so, just to talk to the chefs and the produce managers and stuff to deal with. But now I just send in all of my orders for the Avalon Peninsula. It shows up at their warehouse and they deliver it in a cooler van and
Makes things a lot easier.
Distribute it to everybody who has an order in for that week.
Mm-hmm.
So I've kind of regained a whole day that I can get some more work done on the farm,
Yeah, it's really smart. So if I were to ask you what your favorite part about running the business is, so just think about it as, there's bookkeeping, there's marketing and advertising, there's sales, there's actually physically being a farmer.
It's definitely actually physically it is definitely not the first thing that you said, which is bookkeeping.
I know. I knew what the answer was before I asked the
I
question.
can't stand the bookkeeping side of it. Just drives me completely insane.
Right. But that's the common dilemma with all self-employed people, is that they enjoy doing what they're doing and they turn a hobby into a business, and now that takes them too much away from what it is they love doing.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So the actual growing stuff, like probably my most enjoyable thing that I do is growing tomatoes. I just I'll find myself even on the weekend, and it's kind of hard to separate the personal and business side of it where we live on the farm. It's not like I'm driving to work and driving home, on a Saturday morning. I'll come out on the back step with a cup of coffee and I'm like, oh, let's start down and have a look in the greenhouses now, and then I'll spend 2 hours down there just trellising tomatoes and doing all kinds of stuff that I shouldn't be out on a Saturday, but yeah, that's fine.
But that's good. That's the passion still coming out in it.
Yeah.
I remember my question now, and there's obviously a lot of pain points in what you're doing. You're doing way more than a farmer, just a farmer who isn't into the whole business side of things is doing. What can we do to help reduce all these pain points for people who want to get started in farming, even if it's on a smaller scale? Is there a lot of things that you find difficult that you've kind of worked out a system for?
I wish I had a better answer for that question, but I still have a lot of pain points every week. I'm still trying to find a time every week that I can, consistently the same day, the same time every week, sit down and do my bookkeeping for that week. And then a specific time that I can go down and plant crops and stuff like that. So, and I feel like our whole schedule for the microgreens is like I said earlier, down to a science. There is a set time every single week where I do each task and everything just runs like clockwork. So I'm still kind of trying to find the balance for everything else on a better set schedule so that I can just kind of shut my brain off a little more and just roll with the schedule. So it is definitely hard.
I don't think more people will get into farming because it does seem like a difficult thing, a very manual labor thing. I'd love to, if we can in some way optimize that system, even to make it a little bit easier for people to start growing something. And microgreens, I think, is probably a great place to start. I mean, I do sprouts from time to time. I don't plant them like you do, but I got a full thing of sprouts up in the jar right now, and that'll last me probably 2 weeks because I only eat it from time to time.
Yeah.
And I guess that's probably a good place for people to start. Can you recommend anything else that would help people at least get their hands dirty in some way?
I'd recommend some, a lot of people just grow herbs and stuff in their kitchen. If you just plant some of your favorite herbs, chives or cilantro or dill or something like that in a couple pots and place them on the window ledge in your kitchen. And I feel like it's kind of the gateway crops,
Right.
You're in your kitchen every day, you see this stuff growing, you're picking it off and using it fresh in all your meals that you're making and stuff. So anybody who has an interest or has any potential of having an interest in growing their own food, if they start with something small like that, they might find that they have a real love for it, and then kind of grow from there and start doing more and pots on their patio or then some stuff in their backyard. And
Right.
yeah,
I have a lot of plants now up in the main part of the house, and I love taking care of the plants, and it's something that I do get a lot of joy out of, and that's kind of creating me now to have more passion for growing my own things, but I still know so little about it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how often I got to repot the plant once it gets to a certain size. Do you have any good resources for people to where they can learn more about it?
there's all kinds of stuff on YouTube. I mean, that's when I was talking about that summer where I did a lot of research on small scale agriculture, like probably 75% of that research was just watching people on YouTube who was doing the things that I would like to be doing. So you can get a lot of information from that. There's a lot of garbage on YouTube too, but there's typically the people who are posting content on YouTube surrounding gardening and growing your own food and stuff are people who are passionate about doing things like that. So it's typically not much garbage content surrounding that kind of stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
And you said you have a few greenhouses now. Are you able to grow crops all year round, or are you still seasonally based?
Somewhat seasonally. Like they're not heated greenhouses. They're like, in order to have a heated greenhouse, you need a double layer of plastic, so you got an air gap in there, and it keeps some level of an insulation value, and then you can heat the greenhouse. But our greenhouses we've got two of them. They're 16 feet wide by 100 feet long, and they're just a single layer of plastic. So they're kind of like season extension. Like, we can get started really early in the year. We can go really late in the year. Like it was 2 years ago, like I was talking about, we grew a lot of food, and I think the last of the tomatoes that I picked was in the third week in November. Fresh tomatoes from third week in November. I thought it was pretty good.
So this time of year now, we're in the depths of winter. Are you growing anything, just inside stuff? Or?
We do microgreens all year round.
Yeah.
In the greenhouses right now, I've got some winter radishes, some red Russian kale, like baby kale, mustard greens. Like, there are things that are like more cold tolerant, but I find the biggest limitation that I found anyway around Newfoundland is our short days in the wintertime, like really limited on the number of hours of daylight. So everything, even the stuff that's cold tolerant and it's not going to be killed by frost, like spinach does great with frosty weather, but it just grows so slowly because of the lack of sunlight.
Yeah.
So there are ways, like you could set up some supplemental lighting. So the lights will come on a couple hours before the sun comes up, and then they'll come on again after the sun goes down for a couple hours to try to help things grow a little faster. And
Sounds expensive.
yeah, we might get there one day, but I'm not sure about doing stuff like that either.
So you say does your wife help you with the farm a lot, or?
She does. Like I said, she's got a full-time job, so there's only so much that she can do.
You're on your own.
Yeah, it's mostly me.
Yeah.
How would you heat these greenhouses if you had a choice?
If I had a choice, it would be electric heat. Typically, people use like oil space heaters, propane space heaters, stuff like that. I'd rather not. It's expensive these days, for one, but you're also producing a lot of exhaust emissions and stuff and things like that.
What about the heat pumps for heating the greenhouses in the space? Wouldn't that be more efficient than electric heat, straight up electric heat?
Yeah, never even thought about that, to be honest. I'm not aware of anybody who's using a heat pump to heat a greenhouse. I know of plenty of people who are using like electric space heaters.
Yeah.
But I don't know if people have figured out a good way of using heat pumps to heat greenhouses, but
Might be a good idea.
yeah, might be worth looking into.
And I have no idea how you would do that, but I'm just thinking about energy efficiency
Yeah.
into doing it.
Well, I know, so we've got those two greenhouses. I do want to get like a more permanent heated greenhouse like that. And I know that one model that I'm looking at, that's the one that I'll probably be going with, is whatever the heat source is that you use. They've got like these big tubes that run down the rows between the crops, and the tubes are all just full of little holes.
Okay.
And then you blow the heat into the end of the tubes, and they just all inflate, and then all the little holes are just blowing warm air out all through, right? You know, rather than having a heat source 100 feet away at the other end of the greenhouse, it kind of distributes it evenly throughout all the crops.
Nice.
Right.
So it looks really efficient like that. But yeah, I don't see why a heat pump wouldn't work in a scenario like that.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You can take that one.
Yeah.
You're just gonna go back and just have a bunch of mini splits hooked up, rigged up to the greenhouse or something, or a nice
Hardly using
system
any
for
power.
that. Yeah.
Have you thought about hydroponics at all?
I've thought about it. Yes, definitely have thought about it. I don't have a whole lot of interest in doing hydroponics. I might get into some smaller scale hydroponics and stuff like that, but it's not not part of my main business plan for the future.
Where do they get their nutrients from? I mentioned they're not obviously not taking it from soil.
No, I think typically you're adding liquid nutrients into the water source, and that gets circulated around the roots. And
It sounds like it might be expensive if you're constantly buying food for plants.
yeah, I like hydroponics. I don't have a whole lot of interest in getting into it. I feel like it's definitely got its place in our food production system if it's done the right way. But I don't know. The one thing I don't like is you hear some people who are like all gung ho on hydroponics, and I've heard some people be like, this is the future of our food production systems for humanity. Like all of our food is going to be grown in big hydroponic warehouses and stuff. And I don't think that that's the way that it's going to go. I don't think that that's the way that it should go, because you know there's a hydroponic greenhouse down the States that's like 120 acres or something. One greenhouse.
One greenhouse is
and
120
enormous.
acres?
Yeah, it's enormous.
Wow.
That's
It
massive.
looks like a city.
Wow.
And that's just another example of, you know, everything they're not selling that in the town where that exists. So everything that's produced in that greenhouse is just getting shipped out all over the world, and it's just perpetuating the problem. I think, you know, all these smaller farms like I'm talking about could have like a network where they work with each other and help each other and stuff, but I don't think that like the corporatization of our food supply or food production is a good idea.
Yeah, I know. This whole conversation, I've just, in the back of my mind, just been thinking about how do we make farming a more viable business option for people who want to be entrepreneurs, who don't necessarily have experience in farming like yourself, but chose to go down that path, so that we can become more reliant on locally grown food that's undoubtedly better for us. And get away from the big grocery chains with carrots grown in Mexico. You know, what, I'm not necessarily looking for an answer for this here now, but what is the solution to that? What is the answer to that? Because I mean, we've got a lot of land. Look at, I mean, Canada has a lot of land that we don't use. Our populations are very concentrated into our bigger cities. There's a lot of rural area, but we have a tremendous amount of land available that we could be utilizing. And I think it's a great opportunity, but I think the opportunities aren't being talked about. You touched on earlier in the conversation that, you know, when you're going up through school, it's kind of like, especially here in Newfoundland, I feel your big options are, well, one is there. So you're going to be an engineer, a nurse, you're going to do some sort of business degree like I did. And there's not a whole lot. And then there's the trades, of course. But with the trades, there's carpenter, electrical, plumbing, the other sub trades. There's HVACs and you know, more specific insulation type trades, flooring, drywall, and things like that. Then there's plaster and paints. But I can't tell you the last time I ever heard of anybody growing up in our community in Newfoundland here and was like, I'm going to be a farmer. I want to be a farmer. I'm going to go here and learn how to farm, and I'm going to own a farm, or I'm going to work on a farm. The conversation just doesn't seem to
No, I think there
exist.
is a bit of a... I don't know if you'd call it a stigma surrounding farming and farmers and stuff, but it's
Where do you think this stigma would have come from?
I don't know, to be honest, because I mean, we all got to eat.
Well,
And,
the people
like,
that grow
we-
our food, we should have the most respect for.
Yeah, and we all did it. You know, like our parents. I'm sure your parents and especially your grandparents all grew their own food and had cows and horses and everything. And now it's kind of like a lot of people now kind of got this like stick their nose up to the people down the road who got a cow and they're weirdos and things like that. And I don't really know how.
Well, I think
got
a good
there.
place to start is education. You know, if it was in our school systems, kids at least be learning how to grow from an early age.
Yeah.
And that might inspire them.
Yeah, and I do think that it's kind of turning. Like I feel like the pendulum is maybe starting to swing back the other way because I've since we moved out in 2020, moved out to the Bonavista Peninsula. I've spoken to the high school in Lethbridge, the high school in Clarenville. I've spoken to the elementary classes in Musgrave Town. I've spoken to children's play group, that time thing. Spoken to children and their family at that about like what we're doing in sustainable agriculture and healthy food and all that kind of thing.
That's
like,
pretty cool.
I've been asked in to
So
speak to a class of people about it.
You didn't seek it out. They came to you and were like, "Hey, can you come talk to the kids about this?"
Yeah. Well, I think in all the cases, every one of them, like the girl who was doing the kids play group thing, bought stuff from us and was like, "Can you come in and talk?" And then at the high school in Lethbridge, one of the teachers bought stuff from us and asked me to come in and talk. At the high school in Clarenville, that one of the teachers bought stuff from us, and he also so happened to be my teacher when I was in school.
No way.
And then when he found out that it was me who he was buying the stuff from, he was like, "Can you come in and talk to my class about this?" And
That is really interesting that those teachers had you in, and good on them for it.
Yeah.
Now they need to set up an agricultural course.
yeah.
The government needs to set up in the school system an agricultural course.
Yeah, I
and
think so
stick you as
too.
the head
And I
of it.
feel like everything these days, every topic of conversation is so extreme, one end of the spectrum or the other. And I'm after hearing lots of people say like, you know, our public education system is broken and it's failing. Kids should be getting taught how to grow their own food instead of getting taught math and science. And I'm like, there's somewhere in the middle, right?
Yeah.
Like you
Yeah.
don't just have to be like, who needs chemistry? Put that aside and now teach somebody how to plant a seed. Like you can do something that includes all of that, you know?
I feel that the grade school system, the public school system, K to 12, though, all of those things, all of those subjects are important. To me, that whole system is set up to expose our children educationally to what chemistry is, what physics is, what math is, what
That's
science
exactly
is,
the way I feel about
what
it.
English is.
Because if you took all that away and you were only showing somebody, you know, how to live sustainably, how to grow their own food, how to butcher a cow and all that kind of stuff, that's all great knowledge for that person to have. But in that class could be an absolute genius, a completely brilliant human being who would have taken physics or chemistry and went on and done something great with their life.
Yes.
And if you just take that away because it doesn't have any use to you personally and you think it's stupid, well, then this person is missing out on a major opportunity, and society could be missing out on a major opportunity.
What we're missing is another piece of the puzzle here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's been a lot of key takeaways from today. One of my favorites, I think, is know a farmer. I love that. I think everybody should know a farmer. We have a recurring segment on the show where we ask our guests to provide an actionable takeaway. So something that you do in your life that you think somebody else could benefit from. Does anything come to mind?
I think if people were just tried to be a little more conscious about where their food comes from. And like for me, before I started the business, it literally just came down to looking at the labels of food at grocery stores saying product of Mexico, product of Ontario, product of California, you know? And if you think about where your food is coming from and seeing that it's typically not here, not by people who you've ever heard of, you're going to see that you don't really know what you're eating. And it might be a little bit cheaper, not always, a little cheaper than somebody who's growing it locally. But if you really think about it, you might start to gravitate a little more towards something that's better for our local economy and better for your health.
That's right. And just because it looks good on the shelves doesn't mean it still has all the nutrients as when it was just harvested.
Exactly,
So
yeah.
buy it from closer to home.
Yeah, because they specifically put these wax coatings on it and everything to make sure that it looks good.
So, I mean, we can't really get into it now, but would you be opening? I'm just thinking about people that are listening to the show or watching the show right now. If someone sent you an email or like, hey, Adam, I heard you on the show, really interested in what you're saying. Can you give me some more information? How do I go about getting to know a farmer? How do I get to know you better? How do I get to buy more locally produced products? Would you be open to that conversation and helping people if they reached out?
Yeah, I mean, if you couldn't tell, I love talking about what I'm doing and the benefits behind it and stuff. So, I mean, you can get us on Outport Acres on Instagram or Facebook or on our website, outportacres.com, and all my contact information is on there. Or you can message us on social media, and I'm always happy to talk to anybody about all this stuff. So,
okay.
And if you want to get microgreens, what's your website?
outportacres.com, and there's a section on the website there where you can go in and place your order for the microgreen subscription.
Okay.
Currently, well, I'm always working on making the website a little nicer and more user friendly, but it serves its purpose. Like we've got lots of microgreen subscription customers now. Some of them have been with us for 5 years. So, yeah.
Wow, cool.
Yeah.
That's really interesting stuff. We're gonna end there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, boys.
That was super interesting.